Hi guys, it's Pete from myjewelrybench.com. Today what I want to do is show you how to be a little more creative using curves. Curves are pretty simple objects to work with in Blender, but if you don't work with them all the time, you're not going to really realize how to utilize them. For more information on working with meshes and curves and making models of jewelry and other things, please check out my website at www.myjewelrybench.com, where I cover watch reviews, watch repair, jewelry design, and more. Let's get started. So I told you that we were going to have some fun and creativity with curves, and creating with curves is pretty simple in Blender. It can get a little complicated if you make it complicated, but just try to keep it simple. You've seen me use curves in the past where I've made a circle, or I've added a circle curve like this, and what I've done is I've used it to take a mesh and then wrap it using the curve modifier to make a ring. So here's another way to do it. So we add a circle here. And now I'm going to add in a different kind of a curve. I'm going to add in a rectangle curve. I'm going to size that down to about here. And I'm going to exit edit mode. This one always comes in edit mode because it comes with options. And we'll go over those in a minute. With the circle curve selected, I am going to come down to the curve properties here. And under bevel, I'm going to select the rectangle. And you can see it instantly creates a rectangled object. I'm going to right click on this and make it flat so that we can see it. And now if I grab this rectangle and I size it, you can see I'm adjusting the outer circle, or the Bezier circle. I'm adjusting it to the size of this inner square rectangle curve. And what that does, because they're linked together, so we basically given the Bezier circle the shape of the rectangular curve every time I adjust that, and no matter what position I have it in. So if I hit SX to size it along the x-axis, you can see, we can size it like that. If I do SY, I can adjust the other scale version on this. Now you have to remember curves only have two dimensions, x and y, unless you rotate them along the x or y axis so that they're upright. Once you get that where you want it, and I'm just going to adjust this a little more, SX, and we're going to make that a little thinner, you can see I've got an instant band, and I can just kind of hit that RX90, rotate it along the 90, or the x-axis 90 degrees. And if I come over here and I come down to convert to mesh, now I have a mesh, just like I did with the other, when I create the other rings using the curve and the mesh option. This is just a different way to do it. Let's just kind of go back, get back to our circle. Now I'm going to get rid of that rectangle that we added, and we're going to add in another round circle here. I'm going to size that down just like so. And just like we did with the rectangle, we're going to apply this shape to the outer curve. So I'll select the outer curve. We'll come down to bevel, and under bevel, under the curve properties, I will select Bezier circle 1. And you can see now we have a round donut shaped ring. The fun part about this is I can grab this and I can hit SX, and I can size this along the x-axis, so SX, and when I do that you can see it kind of elongates it. And those of you who are jewelers will know this kind of mimics the shape of a comfort fit ring. So that's another way to get to that. And again, once you're happy with your shape, we can go back in here and we can hit SY, and we can adjust that so we get a wider band. You can do all kinds of fun little things with that. Once you get that where you like it, you can select your first curve, right click on it, convert it to a mesh, and now if we go to edit mode, you can see we have a mesh, and we can model that to be whatever we want. Now, what else can you do with curves? Curves are pretty fun. So I'm going to show you another one. I'm going to hit Shift A. We're going to go down to curves and then go to knots, and I'm going to select a torus knot, and it brings up a lot of options here. Now this is pretty cool. You can see revolutions. I'm going to zoom out here so we can see that. How many revolutions? If we increase that, you can see what it does. Spins, and this will twist it a little bit differently. And then if I look at that from the side, I'm sure a lot of you will remember, especially jewelers, these used to look like what we call knot earrings, which are not as popular today as they were 20, 30, 15 years ago. But here we have the basics of a knot, and then I can go and adjust the size using the major and minor sizes. We can also increase the resolution, which makes it a little smoother. We can increase the bevel depth and kind of make it a little thicker. And then, of course, if we adjust the rotation of things, we can get really cool patterns. And if somebody wanted a custom shape, like a knot, we can actually create that. You can adjust the offset back and forth. And I'll just Control Z out of that. But you can see that's one more thing that you can play with. So I encourage you to go play with these. Let's do Shift A again, and we'll come down to Curve and Knots, and we have a braided knot, which is similar to the last knot we worked with. And we have some things that we can adjust here. And how many sides we want. Again, that might make a good pair of earrings, or maybe a bezel, just some kind of a decoration around a bezel. You can do all kinds of neat little things like that. If you have, for instance, a cameo that you want to make a frame for, this might be the good outer design for the frame. So, just keeping that in mind, I can change the shape, SY, we can elongate it a little bit. You can do all kinds of little things with this, and this looks like a little knot piece of jewelry. So if somebody had a marine or a maritime theme going, and you wanted to make something that mimicked a knot, like in a rope, this is a good option. Let's get rid of that. Let's go back to curves. Now here you can see we have our Bezier curve, which is a standard curve. If we go into edit mode, we can adjust the position of that. I'm going to look down on this in non-perspective view. So I'm going to grab this dot here, hit G so I can move it, and you can see how I change the shape of that path. Now, I did this in the last video. If you haven't seen the last video where I was working with a scroll to make some scroll work, I'll show you how we did that. You can click the link in the upper right corner, and that's one option that you have to do that. Let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of this. And of course we have the circle, which I always work with. Then you have a NURBS curve, which is a little bit different. So we get the curve on the screen, hit edit, and you can see we get 4 points, but it's a little bit different. Now one thing you can do here is hit the E key to extrude, and then you can add in more points. You can see how each of these points, if I grab that, hit G, we can influence that curve. Let's get rid of this. Now here's an interesting one I've worked with. Shift A, we're going to add in a mesh, and I'm going to add in an icosphere. So here's our icosphere. It's nothing too fancy. I'm not even going to subdivide it to make it round. We're just going to leave it the way it is. I am going to select that and then hit Shift A, come down to my curves, and now I'm going to come down to these knots here, and we can do, let's say, a Celtic knot. And what that will do is it will encompass the icosphere. So if I select that, there's our Celtic knot, and then we can change the weave, we can adjust it. I'll bring that back to 0, and we can change how it looks either way. I'm going to change that back to 0. And let's see here. Let's get rid of the icosphere here so we can play with those. And you can see what our Celtic knot looks like. It's kind of an interesting little thing. You can make some changes to it under the curve properties, but it basically, you can see it's just one woven long curve that mimics a pattern. The cool thing about that is that, maybe you were looking for a little 6mm ball that was open like that, and maybe the end of an earring. You could cast these in sterling silver. They're not going to cost much, and that's a good creative way of working with that. Now, I'm going to delete that, and if you notice, if there's no mesh selected on the screen, let's get out of that. If I try to select that curve under knots, it doesn't exist, it doesn't allow me to, you have to add in, as you can see here, select a low poly mesh to associate or encompass that. Now it pretty much works with the spheres, so the icosphere or the UV sphere. Let's just add in another icosphere, and I'm going to hit Shift A. We'll come down to curve. I'm going to select knots, and let's do how about this bouncy spline? And you can see it encompasses the icosphere, and if we hit Tab, there's our edit, and you can see it's pretty wiry. It has no shape to it. So in that case, you'd have to add some extrusion to give it some shape, and you can give it some depth to kind of square it off. And look at that, we've got like a ball of yarn. Pretty cool, the things you can kind of create with that. So now if I wanted to convert this to a mesh, how could I use this? Well, you know, we all have customers who are into kind of creative things. I'm going to get rid of that icosphere, and with this selected here, let's get rid of that. I am going to draw a box. We'll hit Shift A, add in a cube. I'm going to lower this down. I'm going to size that. Now if I take this, I select my ball of yarn, I come down to Boolean tools, I can do a difference. And now I'm left with this shape here. You can see it has some straggled edges in there that you can clean up if you want, so we can go in edit mode, grab that, and just grab that edge and bring it in to right there. And I believe we had another one. I'm just going to move that in here. And we have something that we can add on to maybe the top of a ring just to give it some interest, or maybe make a pendant out of this. You could cut a hole in here, add a bezel, make a pendant out of it, something creative. X, we'll get rid of that. Let's get rid of these. And now let's say I want to, maybe you're making a model of something. So here's a cool thing. I'm going to do Shift A. I'm going to add in a cylinder. Shift A, mesh, cylinder. I'm going to size this down and then size it along the Z-axis to make it a little longer. And let's say I wanted something to look like a spring, like the spring of a car shock. I could grab this. With it selected, I can hit Shift A. I'll come down to curves. I will select knots, and we'll do spiral fit. And you can see what it does is it makes a spiral the height of our cylinder. So now if I get rid of the cylinder, I'm left with this twisty wire thing. If I hit Shift A, and I'm going to add in a circle curve, we'll size that down about like so. I'm going to move that out of the way. And I'm going to select the springy thing here. We're going to add this curve here as an object bezel, and you can see it makes it somewhat thicker. So now if I want to adjust the size of this, if I select the Bezier circle and I size it up or down, you can see I can make that spring look like anything I want it to be. It's pretty slick. Now when you do that, what you're going to find is that the ends of your model are open. So it has a hole. It's kind of like a hollow tube by applying this as its bevel edge. So to fix that problem, especially if you're going to be using these in 3D printing, especially with 3D printing, what we want to do is close up those holes. With our spring selected, we can come down here, and if you look under the bevel option for curve properties, we have fill caps. So never forget to use the fill caps. It saves you from having to go and remesh this at a later time if you forget to do it. Now I'm going to convert that to a mesh, and if I hit Tab, you can see we have a mesh object that is ready for 3D printing that we can do whatever we want to. So if I hit A, S, Z, I can kind of shrink it down to about like that, and there we go. We have this coily looking spring thing. Now there's one more option I want to show you, and this is pretty cool. When I make scroll work like I did in the previous video where I do the engagement ring, you can see in the scroll work I took a path curve and I modified it to fit the shape that I was looking for. However, you can go to Shift A curve, come down to, let's see here, where is it? Curly curve. And if I put that on the screen, let's look at this from the top, you can see we have these decorative shapes that we can use to make curves with. So for instance, if I want to, let's say, put this into a ring pattern, maybe under the gallery, I'll grab this. This is my shape that I want to use. We'll select our curly curve. We'll come down to bevel and we're going to add Bezier, and you can see now I've got this cool shape that's already made for me. And the really cool thing about that is once that's done, I'm going to close off the ends, fill end caps, so now it's solid. Tab, I'm going to right click on it, convert it to a mesh, and we can rotate that along the z-axis here, and I can do this. And if I shift, duplicate, enter, I can make a whole pattern of these. But let's say I want to RY 180. I can put these together just like so. And I've got myself a really cool little pattern that I could use to spread around something else just by joining these together. And we'll do that boolean, and I'm going to union these, and I've got this really cool mesh. We're going to center the origin to center of mass. I'm going to rotate this RX 90. We will hit Control A to adjust the rotation, and Control A, where is it? Select our objects, Control A, rotation and scale. And I'm going to size this along the z-axis just to make it a little taller. And one cool thing is if I grab something out of my heads, let's go look at heads. Let's go to round. We should have a plain round bezel. So I'm going to open that up. Let's make that big, just so we can see what we're working with. Okay, pretty slick. SZ, I'm going to shorten that up and make that bigger. Let's Shift S, Shift S. Okay, so now I want to add in a curve, so I'm going to hit Shift A. We're going to add in a circle curve. I'm going to size that up to the perimeter of our bevel, or our bezel set. I'm going to take my decorative scroll that we just created. I'm going to add a curve modifier. Let's see, add in a curve modifier, and we will select the Bezier, I think it's this one. Yep, it is that one. And then I'm going to add in a new modifier called an array modifier. And let's make 3 of these. So we've got 2 there now, so we're going to adjust that. And looks good so far, but here's the problem. We want the number of decorative scrolls to be applied before we do the curve. So I'm going to grab this, I'm going to hit the little up arrow here, and you can see it wraps our cool scroll work around the perimeter of the bezel. And if I adjust this just a little bit, the circle, I'm going to size that down. We're going to make it about like so. I'm going to hit my scroll again. I'm going to apply all. And I'm going to take that scroll. I'm going to hit the Shift key and grab the bezel. And we're going to do a union on those with the Boolean tool. And now we've got this cool little bezel with some decorative edge all the way around. So you can get very creative with that. Now I just showed you one example of that. I'm going to delete this. We'll delete this. And again, we're going to go to that curve, curly curve. And you can see when I look down on it from the top, this is shape 1. We have 10 shapes to work with. Shape 2, shape 3, shape 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And these are pretty cool to work with because you can select whatever you want. I like something like that. That's pretty cool. And I'm going to scale it along the y-axis a little bit, so make it a little taller, maybe a little wider. And I'm going to click off of that now that I like this. We'll hit the tab key to go to object mode. With our scroll connected, we're going to apply the circle shape to the perimeter of this. Again, we'll select the bevel, Bezier circle, and if I want to make it a little smaller, we can grab that, size that down a little bit, just like so. And again, don't forget to fill. Select this and then fill the ends, or fill the caps. Just closes your model up. It won't cause any problems for 3D printing. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Go have some fun with curves. Don't be afraid to play because there's all kinds of decorative little things that you can do. You can add designs to the side of a ring or the perimeter of a bezel. For instance, if you have a cameo pendant that you want to create a cool little design all the way around with, you can be very creative with the curves. But you're going to have to play with them and kind of get the feel for them. That's, just something that you want to know, because if somebody comes to you with an idea they have in their mind, you can kind of put this together sometimes with curves instead of having to redesign a mesh, and it can be much quicker for you. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, please consider subscribing. If you have any requests or comments, please leave them in the comment section below. And don't forget to check out my blog site, myjewelrymesh.com, for more information. Thanks for watching, guys, and have a great day.